Whoops. Good morning, everyone. Everybody meeting folks at their table. We're going to get started here. I'm Michael Miller, president of the CEO Roundtable, and I hope everybody got some of that great bacon. If you didn't, there's going to be a rush for the door here. What bacon? So we have the best showing ever today. This morning, we're building this association with the CEO Roundtable, and St. Thomas is something that came and went and came back again by popular demand. And our members said that the strategic advantage of culture is a very important topic to them. And so that was the genesis of this whole panel and our MC today, Bill Rendell. So in a moment they'll come up and Bill, are you gonna do, say, 10, 15 minutes first and then ask the panelists to come up? Okay, good. So without further delay, and you'll hear from me later with a shameless plug. So Bill Rendell.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for having me. Good morning. So let me ask real quick, clicker. Gotta get my hands on a clicker. I'm a consummate professor, so I always feel like if I don't have a clicker in my right hand, it's sort of, So good morning, everybody. Culture. Oh, that's okay. Do you hear that? It's a placebo. Thanks, Michael. So it's great to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about my background, and then we'll jump right into it with a neat activity where we're going to actually simulate organizational culture with folks here. As I understand it, we've got a turnout crowd, so congratulations on that. And so, my background, I've been doing consulting for about 20 years. In the meantime, I've been a professor and I have been a CEO of the Center for Ethical Organizations right upstairs. And just a busy bee. I'm a New Yorker. Can you guys hear the accent? A little bit? White Plains? That was a really good guess. Yeah, more Brooklyn, but yeah, so I'm from New York. I attended Columbia University, and I'm gonna tell you really quickly how I got into this thing called culture. My first job, I was a leadership trainer, essentially, on 44th and 3rd, and I thought I was a real big shot. And I enjoyed it so much. But then I started to realize that despite how much leadership training people experienced, they always tended to revert back to their bad habits. And I was so curious about why that happened. I said, I gotta go back to school. So I attended Columbia University and I earned my master's degree in organizational psychology. And then I still wasn't satisfied. If any of you are just pure learners, you'll understand this. I think you're all here. That's a good sign. I went back for my doctorate and I studied adult learning and leadership, and I got profoundly interested in this thing called organizational culture. And I really appreciate being brought here today because we have 3 panelists who address culture from 3 different angles. And that's essentially what you have to do when you're going after bad habits. Habits are stubborn, right? So let's jump into a simulation that has to do with bad habits. Let's assume that you're walking down the hallway at work, okay, regular employee, and you see this crumpled up piece of paper on the floor. In your table teams, I'm going to ask you to talk about how you could talk yourself out of throwing this away. Now, this is the opposite. I realize that you're all here because you're upstanding citizens, right? That's one of the criteria for being here. But let's just put on the hat of all of the ways in that split second that you walk past that piece of paper that you can talk yourself out of picking it up. So take 2 minutes in your tables and brainstorm. You get extra points and the love and affection of our panelists with more creative ideas. All right, so 2 minutes. All right. Let's bring it back. Worst workplace ever, right? Good. Okay. I'm so proud of you. We're going in the wrong direction, but this is where we have a point that we're getting to here. So, what are some ways? Yes. It sure is. There's a flu. It's an awful flu. And you know, germs have a half life on pieces of paper. We know about that. So, there's a flu. Excellent. What else? Creative. There's no recycling bin. So, how on earth, if there's no structure there, can I throw this away? Very good. Booby trap. Can you say more about that? Have you experienced booby traps like this at work? Others. Little dollar in the fishing pole, right? Good. Yes. Beautiful, right? It's the reverse of modeling good behavior. Yes. It's creating the vacuum for others to behave well. Nice. Very nice. Tone from the top. All right. Who else? Yes. You're busy picking a lot of other papers. So you see the metaphor here, obviously. Very good. Very good. One more, maybe. Social proof. Absolutely. If nobody else is doing it, why should I do it? All right, you ready for the next part? What could an organization do to make sure that you pick up that piece of paper? Take another minute and brainstorm all the things an organization can do to make sure you pick it up. All right, without further ado, let's hear about all of the things your organization can do to make sure you pick up that piece of paper. What can you do? Incentive. Tell me something specific you could think about that would incent somebody to pick that piece of paper up. Oh, that's even more intricate. 20 bucks. Beautiful. So money, 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 right? Maybe some faces on the wall, some recognition, right? Yes. Nope, that's it. No more, right? Zero tolerance. Your heavy punishment table? Ah, okay, interesting. What does that say about this table? No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I heard some good stories as I was roaming around. How about the clever table? I call this the clever table here because there's a lot of laughing going on. Very military of you. Yeah. I don't want to work for you guys. Nice. Maybe one more. Yes. Oh, beautiful. Look at this metaphor, just expanding. Hire more people just like us. That's called the halo effect, right? In more ways than one. Good. Excellent. Thank you very much for participating in this activity. If I look around the room, I see several cultures, right? I see team cultures, and the culture is observable in the behavior and the tone and the laughter and the leaning in. But I also see a culture here writ large. And I want to talk about that, okay? So, forgive the iceberg analogy here, but this is really important. That tip of the iceberg represents the observable universe within your organization, okay? And if you think about all of the things that you talked about in order to prevent people or actually promote picking up that piece of paper, We're talking about things that we typically invest money in, right? Strategies, knowledge, skills, abilities, systems, structures, all of these types of things. We're well versed at that. But you may have heard of this quote, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Has anybody ever heard that quote? I just learned that Peter Drucker didn't say that, so I have to stop saying that Peter Drucker said it. But it emerged somewhere, and I think that quote is very apropos. Now, here's the deal. Deep beneath the workday, you've got this creature called culture. And we have to start by operationalizing what culture is before we jump into the panel discussion. What I'm going to do is operationalize what it is by pulling from that simulation, and then I'm going to talk about ROI. Anyone interested in ROI? You're having a conniption over there. Yes, absolutely. If we're going to spend money and we're going to hear about culture budgets, you're going to spend money on this type of thing, you better have an ROI. And we're going to talk about, it comes out of my ears, there's so much ROI, okay? So in that exercise, what we're really hearing is how engaged are employees in their culture? How engaged, okay? What we're talking about specifically with that piece of paper is a nuanced element called moral engagement. And there's actually a scale to measure this. It's called the moral disengagement at work scale. And there are several little strands that you can pull out. And we heard some of these. Operationalizing culture, we know, and this has been well studied and researched, that culture includes the subconscious expectations in organizations that are shared. Okay? So if we gave a survey to you and asked the very same question of this organization, and we found out that, Sarah, what was your example again? How did you put it? It was the example of social permission, was it? Social proof. Yes. So now social proof, that kind of stems off of the work that was promoted by the Kitty Genovese story. Anybody familiar with Kitty Genovese and the story? Well, the story was that there was a woman who was being attacked on a New York City street. Okay, this is way more important than a piece of paper. And people looked out their windows and they saw other lights on, and they assumed that other people were probably calling the police. And that's known as diffusion of responsibility, right? That's just one strand of culture within the culture of moral engagement. Another strand is displacement of responsibility. Okay, that's not my job. Or in the case of something a little bit more serious, that's my boss's job. That's above my pay grade. And that is the first thing I want to talk about. The work-to-rule mentality versus organizational citizenship. Anyone familiar? Okay, this table can't say anything. We're putting you on mute till another 5 minutes. Anyone know what work-to-rule mentality means? It's the same as displacement. It's not my job. It's all of the opportunities and dangers that fall in the spaces between job descriptions. Okay? It's not my job. Okay, so if you don't specifically ask me to do it, anyone experience this with subordinates, right? I'm not going to do it. And I have a hard time even identifying things that are in those spaces. That is called work-to-rule mentality. The antidote to that is organizational citizenship. Organizational citizenship refers to the subconscious assumption that I'm going to do the right thing just because. Okay? Not because I'm going to get formally rewarded or recognized, just because. Now, this is important because it's not just that a leader picks up that piece of paper and throws it away. It's how they throw it away. That's a part of culture as well. So there's two ways, I love this, two ways a leader can throw out a piece of paper. Think metaphor here, okay? Metaphor. They could pick up the piece of paper and they can look around and do this. right? Or they just pick up the piece of paper and they throw it away, right? So we can learn to be good citizens, but when it becomes inherent, that's a different story. Now, what's important is at the top here, right? These are things that we can learn informatively. But when we talk about transforming aspects of culture like engagement, it has to be done in a way that shakes people's bad habits. Now, ROI, let's jump into that. Organizational citizenship is an area of study that I've been studying since 2001. Widely studied. So what type of ROI do you get if you increase organizational citizenship? You get improved overall performance. That's kind of a no-brainer, right? You also get increased sales performance, productivity, and customer service ratings. Just think about what somebody on a call center would do, right? Just for the person. You've heard of the Nordstrom story of the salesperson who went out and found a tire, right? An actual car tire for the person who was asking for one. Improved effectiveness and functioning, and greater attraction of top talent. You can actually make any strand of culture, and we'll talk about those strands as the panelists come up here. You can make any one of those strands something called an employee value proposition. Does anybody know what that is? An EVP? This is the new language. Oh, I'm so happy I get to introduce it to you. We are engaged in a war for talent. Don't mistake it. Somebody mentioned over here hiring people who are like us, upstanding people. If you want to do that, studies have shown, and in your packet you'll see some of this information in these studies. Studies have shown that people who graduate from top-tier colleges would rather work for an organization whose culture is more moral and ethical, right, than top-paying organizations. So this is one way to win the war on talent. But you gotta put your money where your mouth is, and you have to show how you are attending to culture. All right, so let's just talk about engaged cultures versus disengaged cultures, because that's really what this boils down to. It's how people are motivated to do things. Let's really get into ROI. Now, this is a funny little graphic. I did some research on industry-wide how much cost there is when a culture is disengaged. Now, I doubt you can see it from where you're sitting, so I'll help you look at this here. $370 billion yearly losses due to low employee engagement. Some of you are laughing because you're ahead of me in the March Madness category over here. You know who you are, right? You're not immune to it either. There are things that pull our attention away during the workday. Lost productivity during the solar eclipse. Do you remember that? Were you out in the hall with the skyways looking at the solar eclipse? Blinding yourself? That's a whole different study. $253 million in yearly losses due to absenteeism. And there's another thing, which I'm sure has been studied, and I just didn't have enough time to research it, called presenteeism. Does anyone know what presenteeism is? Well, back in the day, I used to call this solitaire syndrome. Okay, so I don't know that people are playing solitaire so much as Facebook now, but it's if you're walking through the organization and you look at a computer screen and somebody's playing solitaire, or somebody's social loafing, right? They're talking to somebody else about whatever, right? That is lost productivity. You're there, but you're not there. Now, research by Gallup shows that 22% higher profitability is a result of organizations who proactively improve engagement in their organizations, okay? You could read the rest. 37% lower absenteeism, 48% fewer safety incidents. And some things that are not up here, because I don't want to fill the slide too much, are things like reduced lawsuits, okay? Think about that. Reduced sabotage, all kinds of interesting things. Now, my favorite one of all is reduced turnover, okay? Because there's an equation that I'm going to share with you that you can actually use when you go back to work to calculate the cost of turnover due to culture. 65% lower turnover if you proactively attend to this. If you are a 150-person company with 11% annual turnover, And to refill a role, let's just say you spend $25,000 per person on hiring, $10,000 on development, and you lose about $50,000 of productivity. Your annual cost of turnover would be $1.57 million. Fun to extrapolate those things, right? Or painful. I think it's kind of fun. Reducing this by just 20% would immediately yield value over $300,000. Think about that. Now, our panelists address culture from multiple angles, and that's why I was so excited to MC this event. And I think without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists one by one. And as I introduce you, come on up to we all have nameplates here. All right, so we've got Dr. Sarah Bridges, who I know from a former life. Dr. Sarah Bridges is the founder and leader of Bridges Consulting, and she has over 25 years of experience as a psychologist in that field of organizational psychology, executive coach, speaker, writer, and leadership advisor. Dr. Bridges is known for offering challenging yet practical solutions to help people break through their own assumptions. That's transformative learning. That's down here. Dr. Bridges was a senior executive in human resources with a $1.7 billion Fortune 1000 company and served as a senior consultant with a leading international industrial psychology consulting firm. Everybody, let's give it up for Sarah Bridges. Next, we have Jim Damiana, who serves as executive manager, director, and tenant advisory office specialist of the Newmark Knight Franks Minneapolis St. Paul office, and a designated broker for Minneapolis brokerage operations. Jim is an established industry leader, and he's among the most successful and widely recognized market leaders in the Minneapolis commercial real estate market. Jim has over 30 years experience specializing in tenant buyer representation for local and national firms in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and surrounding suburbs. Jim has a bachelor's degree from Augsburg College, where he majored in accounting and minored in finance. Jim, you're already up there. Let's give it up for Jim. Very prompt. And last but not least, we have Casey Hatsong, co-founder and principal, leads creative and strategy while integrating design with the research process at Fusion Hill. A leading designer, Hatsong pairs her creative and analytical abilities to create stellar, business-driven outcomes. She and her team are passionate about creating touchpoints that are unique, relevant, and compelling. Casey's industry experience includes, healthcare, financial services, and consumer packaged goods. Quite versatile. You could see her creative come to life for US Bank, Boston Scientific, Optum, Avon, United Healthcare, and Alliance. So let's give it up for Casey. All right, I've got a few questions in my pocket here we can begin with. All right, you all ready for these questions? All right. So one of the questions that I'm just going to pose to the group, which is an important question to start with, is how do you see your role when it comes to the culture that is in your company? How do you see your role? And what role does role play? Panelists, what would you say about the role of their role?
Yeah, do you want to start? Sure. Well, hello, everybody. As CEOs in the organization, the role that I see you playing is that you are constantly being observed. I mean, we talked about social proof. We talked about the way that we influence other people. And I think among everything else that you do, you set the tone for the culture. And I find this when I go in and do organizational consulting. And there may be a wonderful culture statement on the wall, and we're training people on that. But when the CEO or his or her team are out of sync with that, we can't even get out of the gate on culture. Conversely, when you're modeling that and you are out there as the main cheerleader and representative of that, the culture work, of course, goes more smoothly. So.
Nice. And Jim, I know that you work in terms of outside of the person, the space that people work in, and that's also another observable function. Can you speak a little bit more to the role of real estate surrounding the employee?
Sure. First, pretty intimidating. Columbia University, doctors. I kind of excelled more at the social aspects at Augsburg College. But I think that's helped me a lot with the company culture. So to answer your question, yeah, commercial real estate. So say you're looking for office space. That's what I do every single day. Newmark is a full service commercial real estate firm, but I meet with CEOs and CFOs all day, and the real estate can really hold back your culture if you have the wrong real estate. So I think we're going to get into it a little later, but we can show some examples and give some stories about how office space has held them back and they couldn't hire, they couldn't attract and retain top talent because of their real estate, and how they can avoid that.
And one of the things that I love about you, Jim, is that you also do assessment, and I think you'll talk a little bit about that. But your actual office space can be assessed to determine the degree in which this space supports healthy culture. Now, we've got the observable, but there's also the unobservable, right? The values that you hold dear. And I know Casey works a lot in this domain. Casey, could you speak a little bit about values?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is a territory that comes really naturally to us as a branding agency. Often we're setting the personality and the promise of a brand. And one of the things that's really important is to understand what those underlying values are. So, as you're creating something, um, it's so important to really define what those are, that they're believable, that there's something that, if you're the business owner or the founder, are rooted in your philosophy, and can attract others who agree with you. But one thing that I've learned over time is that they have to continue on beyond the executive group, that it really has to be rooted in what the employees also value, as well as your clients. Your customers have to agree with those.
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. How does that resonate with you all so far? Anybody have any thoughts, questions for the panelists? What's interesting here is if you look at what we're talking about, it's the whole person. We're talking about addressing the whole person, the environment, what's going on internally, what's going on externally. So Sarah, I have a question for you. How could the folks in the audience here get feedback? And I know you talk about honest feedback givers. How can they all get feedback that would help them understand more about their culture?
This is something that I hear very frequently from CEOs and other senior executives, that we get to a certain level in the organization and it's kind of lonely. I mean, not only in terms of people you can have as sounding boards, and that's one thing I love about CEO Roundtable, to have a safe space with peers that you can really get real and get feedback. But within the organization, we've got to know how people are seeing us. Everybody has strengths, everybody has blind spots. And I think a very straightforward way we can do it is through 360 feedback. And some of you are nodding, likely use this, whether it's a formal system that's online or having a coach come in and gather data. And that's where we get confidential, anonymous feedback that's then shared with you, and you see the themes that come out, and we get to take action on those themes. It's ideal when we also, from that as a launch pad, set up a culture where it's expected we're all giving each other feedback regularly. And when I work in cultures that do this, it's pretty magical to see what happens. Feedback is taken away from being a big, heavy, negative, let me sit you down and tell you, and turned into data. You know, that you nailed it there. Wow, I know you're working right now on having better executive presence, and I noticed you were kind of slumping and quiet. But it's having an entire team talk to each other about strengths and also things they've learned they need to work on, and opening that door that we will regularly provide each other feedback on both.
Nice. Can either of you speak a little bit to that? Maybe how office space plays a role, or values? I know, Casey, you talk about people coming to work as their true selves so that their employees can feel comfortable providing feedback.
Right. That's one thing that we've seen at Fusion Hill really strongly. We have a lot of very young staff that are coming right out of college. It's their first job. They start as interns, and then we hire about 40% of our interns. And so, one of the things that's really hot on their plate is they're coming out of kind of an altruistic, heavily diversified universities, and they come to corporations, small firms, and they look around and they say, I don't look like you. So, how do I fit in? And so that's become really important to us as we're looking to diversify our staff. And it's not just about diversity, it's about inclusion. So how do you make sure that people are comfortable and able to fully come and to work and um, contribute kind of freely? I think that's really important to that the culture be open and welcoming to that. So we're working really hard on that to just represent and make sure that people can be a part of forming the culture.
Very nice. Thank you. Jim.
Yeah, as far as office space, I'll give you a quick little story. Who's familiar with messing with Sasquatch, Jack Link's beef jerky? Raise a hand. All right, so they seem like a very fun culture, fun company, correct? When we interviewed for the assignment to help them find their real estate, they had 2 separate office spaces, and I walked through the office, private offices on the exterior with no light coming through, high cube walls, no collaborative areas. And the CEO said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think you're in soul crushing space and you need to move." And he's like, "That's not a real good way to get hired." And I go, "Well, I'm going to call it the way I see it. And I think your space is crushing your culture, and you need space that's going to enhance your culture." So we were able to find them a location, and they love their space now, and their hiring has doubled since they moved to their new office space. And another example, quickly, Newmark Knight Frank. So we opened the office 17 months ago with 5 people. And in commercial real estate, we're trying to lure people away from firms that they're doing really well right now. I mean, the market's great, and unemployment's 3%. So we created this culture with, now we have beer taps and wine coolers and wine fridges and pool tables and a patio, and we grill every Wednesday for the office, and we do a lot of things. Now, we could have all this great, cool office space in a great office building, but if you don't activate the space or activate as a leader, it means nothing. So that's, I think, the big key is you have to activate and use the space. It's not just, hey, there's a patio out there, don't use it. No, let's put a picnic table out there. Let's put a grill out there. Let's buy 100 sunglasses with our company name on, so when your visitors come over and they go, "Oh, it's sunny out here. Here, put these sunglasses on. Take them with you." That's what we do for our culture.
I think what you're seeing here, thank you, Jim, is a modeling of transparency. When Jim went to that client, he kept it real, so to speak, right? So I really appreciate that all the panelist members are doing it. I want you to keep it real too for a second. How many of you have fishbowl offices? You know what I'm talking about, right? Fishbowl offices, you've got the glass surrounding the office. I'm very curious how that works for you, and if you see metaphor in that in terms of transparency. Is there such a thing as too transparent? What do you all think? This is open to all.
I want to comment on this. Our entire office is glass, and we actually, it can be difficult to have a difficult conversation when there is nowhere to go. We actually had a couple people say, "There's nowhere to cry at Fusion Hill." Like, that's right. But that can be tricky, but we hope that is more of an open door policy. We're not hiding anything. The bosses aren't tucked away in some corner. It's important.
Nice, thank you.
I'm seeing somewhat of a boomerang effect in office space. About 5-10 years ago, it was let's go open concept. Everybody's at tables, and well, when I talk to these CFOs and CEOs, I go, "How's it working for you?" Well, everybody's putting noise canceling headphones on because they don't have walls. So they're creating their own walls and they're not collaborating. So I think it's a boomerang coming back where you need some private area. You need some workspace. If you got to put your head down and work for an hour, you need to do that, whether it's in your office space, in a building common area, whatnot. So that's how we created our offices. You can go on the patio if you want. You can go on the building 3rd floor if you want. You can go into a private office that we leave a number of them open so you can make a phone call or just work for an hour. I think everybody wants a voice and a choice, and that's the one difference I've seen is it's more inclusive. Get all your employees involved and say, what are you looking for? What will make you more productive? And then provide them that space.
Bill,
Yes, please.
one thing I would just add on this, and I'm not the expert on real estate, so I love what you're saying, but from a psychology standpoint, there's got to at least be some spaces where people in different areas run into each other naturally. And I think the best example of this comes out of a study about MIT, the university. And years ago, somebody noticed that a huge, disproportionate number of Nobel winners were coming out of MIT, and not just MIT, but out of Building 20. And they went in to study what is this mysterious, magical Building 20? It must be all, the best scientists. And when they got in there and studied it, what they found was it was a dilapidated building that had been set up during World War II for overflow professors. It was not a place you wanted to end up. You weren't with your team. It was kind of run down. And what they ended up creating was a natural environment where people in different disciplines would regularly run into each other. And guess what? They ended up doing research together, and out of that came a huge number of Nobel Prizes. If we don't have ways that people in disparate areas of the organization can blend, we lower creativity.
Very interesting. And so now we're I love the ebb and flow here because we're moving into the psychological aspects of culture. And one question I have, and I'm curious, I'm thinking it might be on your mind too, is you could have an okay culture, right? But what if you've got one bad apple? One bad apple, so to speak.
I gotta
in the
go.
group. Say more.
Well, it's kind of the Zappos. Anybody read the Zappos book? And their mission statement is, here's our mission statement, and we hire and fire off of this mission statement. Maybe you don't say you're fired, you have a warning, but here's our culture. You have to live up to this, otherwise it's not going to work.
Very nice. And I know that Zappos also gives an exploding job offer. You all know what an exploding job offer is? Right? We'll give you $3,000 if you sign right now. Zappos does something interesting. It'll give you $3,000 if you walk away. What do you think the reason is for that? This has got to use your noggin a little here. Yes? Right. The people who aren't engaged, right? Can you see value? I mean, you're giving away $3,000. Can you see a value in that?
I think if you did a study, it would cost a lot more than $3,000 to get rid of a bad employee.
That's right, $3,000. So we're talking about just $3,000. Are there other things that?
Well,
Please.
back to values. This is one thing that you can have values or a mission statement just up on the wall, but if you're truly living your values, you're incorporating them into your HR process. You're creating budgets around spending that enhance and influence your budget or your culture. We use in our reviews not only observed performance, but also just how are you tracking? How are you demonstrating our values? And how does that come through in your interactions internally and with clients? And we reward on that. Conversely, if you don't, it's kind of a merit system. You're demoted for those, and those will impact your performance. We also use traction at Fusion Hill, and one of the kind of things in the back we always use is the GWC. Does this employee get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? And from a business perspective, you can kind of, with values, you can say, well, they're not super fun, but they're kind of fun, if that's your value. But really getting to a more objective standpoint is, if they just don't get it, then let them go because they never will. And so it's just a faster, easier business perspective to help them too.
You know what's fascinating about that is that when we talk about values, it's some people, I do work and I ask people, have you ever created a personal vision statement? How many of you have ever done that? Okay, good. So about half. That's fantastic. And if you haven't done it explicitly, you may have done it implicitly, just thinking about what your values are. I think that's a testimony to the people who are in this room in particular. But in most organizations, leaders get a little uncomfortable when you ask them to do that sort of activity. So I wanted to ask this group, what is it that makes it difficult for people to access their own values and be transparent about those values?
Well, I think for some employees, it's will I fit in? Will that mesh with my culture? And if I don't kind of toe the company line, will I have a job? So I think a lot of people are fear-based and they need a job and they're not willing to answer honestly.
So there's a fear involved. Good, very good. What about vulnerability? Does anybody have something to talk about when it comes to the power of vulnerability?
I'd be happy to take that one.
Mhm.
One of the things that we know, I was just working with an executive team that had come together last week. And when we look at research, or any of us who have been part of teams or worked with teams, one of the best ways to foster trust on that team is to find ways for them to be vulnerable with each other. So circling back to the 360 and tying into what Casey said about values, for instance, doing 360 reviews based on values and then sharing what you've heard with the rest of the team is a wonderful way to be vulnerable with each other, but it's collective. Nobody's in the hot seat. It's not the 1980s therapy sessions. Let me tell you what I don't like about you. It's sharing our own data with each other and asking for support from other people. And in my experience over 20 years working with senior executives, the person who is able to bring in appropriate vulnerability to the team, say when we're wrong, say when I need help, talk about a time you've been a bit overwhelmed or made a mistake. That is the leader that is held in highest esteem by the team because they're seen as real and they're seen as strong.
I just recently had a conversation with Rob Cancalosi, who heads up GE's Leadership Development Center up at Crotonville. And I asked him, what are you working on these days? And he says, I'm working on the hardest thing that you can possibly imagine. And we spend 20% of our operating budget on this. And that is encouraging people to make mistakes, as long as they're not too expensive. That's the catch, right? So creating those spaces for people to make mistakes. And it's hard for people to admit that they make mistakes. It's especially hard for people who are really, really smart and have spent most of their academic life getting A's. There's a fantastic HBR article called Teaching Smart People How to Learn. And it's all about this. How do you actually get these smart people to learn how to make mistakes? I wonder if any of our panelists can talk about that, even from the standpoint of values, right? The value of being able to make a mistake.
I'm sure we make lots of mistakes every day. One, I will tell you about a particular incident that just happened earlier this summer. It was mortifying to my business owner, my business partner, and myself. We are a three-year in a row best places to work organization. We have awesome feedback when we have employee surveys. We do so much fun activities. And we had a young man join our firm middle of the summer. First day, we actually had a company potluck. He was given the employee handbook. And on day 4, he quit. At 5 o'clock, he sent a scathing email that addressed my business partner and myself, saying how horrible our culture was, how it was quickly killing him. And we said, whoa, what went wrong? What have we done here? On one hand, I wanted to be defensive to say, well, he's only been here 4 days. What could he possibly know about our company? And on the other hand, I thought, he's only been here 4 days and he sees something. What is he seeing? So our reaction to that was to pull the entire company together. Our lawyer said, don't do that. You're opening yourself up for someone to say something horrible, to open up a can of worms. But we said, no, we have to address this. We have to be vulnerable. We have to come out and say, we're shocked. What can we do to make this better? And we heard from our employees that while it was an uncomfortable conversation, that we actually did the right thing this time by being open and having the conversation and really starting for everyone an opportunity to talk. So certainly we made a mistake with that young man with something that he saw in our culture, but now it's really spiraled and started this amazing conversation where there is transparency. So we're learning from the mistakes that we may not even know we've been doing.
Fascinating.
Somebody a lot smarter than me once said, if you don't make mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. So try different things. As a company, one thing, well, we do the lunches every Wednesday. We grill for everybody, and that's gets people together. We thought it was just, we'll have lunch together and maybe we'll talk a little work. Well, people sit next to different people all the time, depending where the seats are, and talk about their weekend, and it's really a bonding thing. And then also monthly, we do a little celebration, go on the patio with a beverage at the end of the day and say one good thing that happened to you personally in the last month and one good thing that happened professionally. And that really gets everybody involved, and it's transparent. And some people, it's harder to share those things, but if you do it once a month, it's manageable and people understand where you're coming from at that point. And we preach this to our clients. We say inclusion. Get committees set up when you go to look for office space. Get somebody from each generation. Get somebody from each department. Have everybody have a voice so that at the end of the day, another thing is when they sign a lease, it might be 9 months before they move in. And that's right when I tell my clients, we're having a town hall meeting. We're going to the new space that has not been built out yet. We're going to have the architect there, the building owner there, the janitor there, everybody that they would ever run into. And I'm going to talk about all the amenities in the area, because in that 6 to 9 months, they're being recruited heavily from that company, and they're calling people and saying, hey, you know what? You're moving across town. Where are you going to have coffee? Where are you going to eat? Where's your dry cleaner? Where's your daycare? So they're going to be picked off with 3% unemployment. So we do the town hall to nip that in the bud right there. And the people have questions at the town hall, but they feel the inclusion at that point, and they feel a part of the decision.
So you can see from these thoughts that the panelists have that there's definitely a return on investment when you do this sort of thing, right? There's what you can lose. We often think about what you can lose if you don't know where the dry cleaner is, for instance. That's a real thing, right? But what do you have to gain? And I'm reminded by an author named Ari de Goos, who's also written for HBR. And there's one sentence that I just can't get out of my head, and I've used it at the beginning of all the things that I teach and do, and that is that the only sustainable competitive advantage that an organization has is culture? Let's go a little deeper than that. What is the thing that makes, think about how globalization and technology has advanced so quickly, right? Keeping you on your toes. What is the advantage? It's innovation. It's the ability to innovate. So spaces and values and even neuroscience can be used to tap into what do you need to create a space where people feel comfortable making mistakes and being creative. And a big part of this is that for leaders, this might seem very nebulous. This is great and it sounds theoretical. But what I do know is that there are what we call psychometrically validated ways of assessing cultures. And I've heard of a couple of things. I've heard of 360s up here. And I know, Jim, you have an assessment that has 18 different, is it that right? 18 different variables?
Yeah, we actually have a slide, if we can pull that up right now. And the majority of this work was done by St. Thomas alumni, Maura Carlin, who's sitting at the table 6 over here. Raise your hand. There we go. And then Crystal next to her helped with the slide. But basically what we did was office buildings are ranked A, B, C. And if you would ask 10 real estate professionals the difference between an A and a B office building, you'd get 10 different answers. So we started thinking it's all about amenities. And then the more worked on it and did the research, she said, what about good natural light, HVAC that works well, management that's responsive? So it's really features of the building and the amenities. So it was the tenant experience. So she came up with these 18 different categories: cell phone coverage in the building and all the things that a tenant experiences. So it's on a 5-point scale. You go to a restaurant, you take an Uber, everybody understands a 5-point scale rather than ABC office. And what we're finding is our clients are using this as a tool for their employees. And they're saying, look, we were in a 3-star experience before, and we care about you so much, now we're in a 4.5 star. Or economics are very important, so we're in a 3-star for economics. We're going to stay in a 3-star building, but we're going to put what's missing in the space so you have a 5-star experience. And they're using this to retain and attract talent, and they're really gravitating towards this.
Excellent. All right, so there are ways to assess, and this is very important. I think what I would like to do now is a little experimental, and that is we have so many people in the room, and there is a collective expertise here that I know the panelists are probably feeling. It's a good type of collective expertise. I wonder if we could take at your tables maybe just a couple of minutes to think about what you've heard so far, and it's been a lot. And think about what questions or comments or even suggestions that you have in terms of improving your organization's culture. So why don't we just take a couple of minutes, round robin, see what you've got, and then we'll circle back to you and come to our panelists with those questions and thoughts.
Table 9.
Tell me more about Fusion Health.
Yeah, we're a marketing agency, so we have research, strategy, and creative.
Mm-hmm.
We're 45 people. When we started, it was just 2 of us, and we have mostly been women.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not sustainable, and people start to question. So do you not accept men, or do you? So yeah.
When did you start?
When did we start? 15 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yes, yes. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
How about
for
us?
sure.
Can we do anything?
Yeah. What else should we?
No, I think it's.
Oh yeah. Good for you. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah.
That's great. No, I can't believe you've only done this twice. You're doing a great job.
Well, you're a professor because you're in front of the room all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, fun. Yeah. You have the hardest job.
What's that?
You have the hardest job by
Yes.
far. Good.
Jump around the room and
Yeah.
ask questions.
That's good.
Yeah, I think
great.
so.
All right.
I'm
We have a lively discussion going on, so I'm going to ask folks to bring it back.
Excited.
If I could have your attention.
right.
Now, I know that in teaching, and our panelists know this, and you might know this, that the true measure of a good, hearty conversation is when you can't get the group back. Whew. So I sort of time it in my mind. How long did that take? It took a while. So you all have ideas and thoughts and questions. Would anyone like to share one of those? Yes.
I think it's a multitude of things. In our office space, we have the fun area and the work area. Not that work isn't fun, but we have a big metal cabinet we call the Winnebago that separates the two. And on the back side of it is where the beer taps are, the refrigerator, the sink, and the cafe, and the patio, and the pool table, and all that stuff. That's not to say that you can't go in that area to work, but if you go in that area to work, there could be distractions. So we also then provide other areas outside of your workspace that you can go and with 2 people and collaborate and work, and or you can stay at your desk, or you can take an open office and shut the door if you need private time, or go to the building common area, 3rd floor, and have private space. So we have scheduled events that are more fun, but also work related. But then we also say, here's the separation. If you go in this area, know there could be distractions. Otherwise, you got multitude of areas that you can go and work and be private.
Nice. Yes, please. Mm.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
I could,
Yeah.
yeah. I could speak about this from an industrial organizational psychology point of view. And I just actually visited a client in India who creates motor parts. Okay, so you've got this production line and people are working away. They're just working away. And there was a study at MIT. I mean, now there's multiple studies on environments and their impact on culture. And the study showed that if you are in a space that has some foliage, some green, right? Even if the green is fake, it has an impact on ease of work and productivity because you know that we're much more productive when we're kind of like in a zone or in a flow, right? We're working, we're getting it done. Boom, boom. There's a beat to what we're doing. And that's a part of culture, right? This ease of being, a culture of well being at work is essential, especially for a productivity culture.
And I should be clear, we're not having the beer taps at noon. That's more client events after hours where they come on the patio, or a monthly client or employee thing where we go out on the patio. So I agree with you. You have to have kind of a separation. One thing we do is our private offices are on the interior, and people that are in the offices are more the loudspeakers, whereas more people, I'm in the open area. I'm running the office and I'm in an open area. So that's how we try to show our culture.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. That's a fantastic question because when you leave here, what are you actually going to do? Why don't I start off? Is that okay if I start off and then maybe I'll pass it over to you? The first thing, think of yourselves like doctors, right? You have to know what's going on in your culture. And if you don't, I mean, you got to, leadership is a lonely place, right? And it's difficult to get feedback, but you've got to know what you're working with first. You don't want to just put a pool table in there and just say, oh, let's activate fun. Well, what does that mean? What's going on specifically in your culture? So there are symptoms, right? But assessments, focus groups, interviews are something that you can do right away. There are questions you can ask right away to determine what it is that you need to work on. So I would say assessments is where you begin. And there are numerous assessments. By the way, in your packets, my little addition is a number of assessments that you can use. You can go out and use, okay? The first two, I don't know if it's on the last page. Oh, it looks like it's on the first page. The first two get at what's going on subconsciously, okay? And this is like absolutely fascinating. Both of these are free. The first one is called Project Implicit. And what that does is it measures implicit bias that exists, okay? And we all have implicit bias. Implicit bias is nothing more than, at a collective level, your company's culture. And there are biases about virtually everything, right? So that's one thing that you can do right away. How about the panelists?
I'm so glad you brought that up. We actually use that for all incoming employees as a part of our diversity initiative, the implicit Project Implicit.
Oh,
We also use an annual employee survey, which really helps us drive our strategy for the upcoming year. So we can, and we divide it by role and kind of division. So we can see, what does our operations team really value? What do our interns say? What does our creative team need? And I think to the previous question, it's finding out what is driving. What do they want? Is it flexibility? Well, flexibility for somebody who's at a desk job looks different than somebody who's a remote worker. So you can start to bake those things in. Do you want me to talk about the budget?
Yes. How do you create a culture budget? This is fascinating. Yes.
So we actually we believe in this so much. It is our differentiator amongst other agencies. It's how we attract people with our culture, that we put our money where our mouth is. So again, I talked about kind of employing this into our HR practices with hiring and performance reviews, but we have a culture. So one of our values, as I mentioned, is fun. So if you don't put money and something on the calendar to have fun, then it's up to your employees to just be fun people. So you have to have both. You have to plan those fun times and put money towards it, and then make sure it's stuff that people want to do, that they value that time that they're spending outside of the office. We have quite a budget actually for gifts. We have something where we surprise someone every month with just little things. So yesterday was National Play-Doh Day. We had a pyramid of Play-Doh that everyone could just grab and kind of use their creative juices. But it's something different. It comes from my business partner and I. That's really important, that they know that it's us kind of valuing them. But that's a budget that we track to, and we make sure. In past years, it was like, oh, we're not spending the budget. We're too busy. We are fanatic about how are we doing on that, and making sure that it's enough.
Excellent. Jim.
What we found is every culture is so unique and different. So that's where we do the assessment. That's where we have them set up the committees, as we said before, and find out what's really important to you and how can we put things in your space. A pool table doesn't work in every space, obviously. Ours has been used, I think, 3 times in 4 months. So, but just find out, what do you need private areas to go work and collaborate? Do you need private offices for half your employees? What is your culture? You can't totally change someone's culture with their space, but just use it to enhance it. But you have to dive deep to find out what that information is.
Good. Sarah.
Okay, here's 2 concrete things, and they don't cost any money. So this is really straightforward. The first one, if I went into an executive team, we're not going to spend any money and you're going to improve culture, I would have each executive block 20 minutes twice a day that you're going to go out and walk the floors. And I do work a lot in manufacturing plants. One of the things that has changed a culture that I've worked in, I love fun committees. I love space. I'm a fan of everything that's been said. For free, I want your time. And I want you to genuinely get out, get to know people, talk to them. You will get all kinds of information doing this. So that is a critical piece. The other one is just, what is the mood in your organization? And if we want to do one thing that'll immediately improve each employee's life, I would challenge each of your managers to sit down and say, how can I grant you more autonomy in your job? Okay? You may not have autonomy that I'm working the line or I'm working this machine, but there may be some way that you can have some autonomy in how you do that. Believe me, those employees have good ideas on how something can be done differently. And when we look at satisfaction, it's tied to feeling like we have some control and autonomy. So get out there and walk around. It costs you no money. I get it's time. You can do it. Second of all, have each person who manages someone sit down and ask for how they can give more autonomy.
I think Hell's Kitchen just did that.
Oh,
They were
okay.
struggling, and one of the owners went to 10 key employees and said, how can we make things better? Give me your suggestions, and now they're doing well.
Just asking helps a lot. And I'll just give you, if you want to Google something, I never say that, but I know panelists up here want to help. Google job crafting. Okay, job crafting gets to what Sarah was talking about. There are steps in job crafting. It's not necessarily providing a job description. People got to do what they got to do, but it's how you do what you need to get done. And the more autonomy you allow people in actually crafting the way that they get it done, as long as they're not, doing anything dangerous or illegal, it's very helpful. I'm going to add a third dimension to this, which is creating a space to reflect. This is one of the number one missing pieces in organizations, right? So creating a space to reflect, you can do this with, coffee talks on Tuesday mornings. I've seen that work really well. And I hope that all of you do that to some extent, but being conscious about that and involving people, being inclusive in that process is helpful. I think we're going to wrap this up. We've done a fantastic job. If we could give a round of applause to our panelists. Excellent. Can I hand it over to you, Michael, at this point? Here we go.
Thank you, Bill. And thanks to Bill for running the show, for delivering news we can use, and for all of our panelists. Another round of applause, please. All right. Left to right, Jim is a strategic partner of the CEO Roundtable. Casey is a member, and Sarah is a great friend of the CEO Roundtable. We were thrilled to get them as panelists, and a couple of them objected at first, but came through for us because we knew we needed this valuable panel. Now, so this topic bubbled up from the CEO Roundtable. And what is the CEO Roundtable? Because here we have members, we have St. Thomas alumni. St. Thomas alumni, please raise their hand. You're most welcome to be here. Thank you for being here. And finally, we have our strategic partners. Strategic partners, please raise your hands. I'm going to run through them very quickly. So Jim, yeah, as our panelists, Newmark Knight, Frank, and Brent over here. Brent is his sidekick, partner, Grand Poobah. Who's the Grand Poobah? You guys fight it out. Okay. Oasis DEG, Mitch and Andy. Mitch there, Andy there. Okay. And Birch Cove. Jenna, are you? I didn't see you here. I know Jenna was supposed to be here. Not here? Okay. All right. VTH, Traction. Greg, we mentioned Traction a couple of times. Greg's a new strategic partner of the CEO Roundtable, and thanks for being here. Greg is also doing Traction for the CEO Roundtable and helping us to get accountable to delivering the value to our members. BWK, Jim. Jim, where are you? There you are. Jim, okay, and as I always say, the best accountants. If you don't love your accountant, you need a new accountant. We love this guy. All right, Fellhaber, Dan, how do you love an attorney? we do. Yeah, well, not but okay. All right, so, and Dan, you want a straight shooter, somebody who's gonna give you the lowdown when you just pick up the phone. All of these folks are happy to be the hotline for help on any of their topics. So please look in your program to look for these strategic partners. They're the ones, and our members, of course, the ones who make this all work. So how about a round of applause to our strategic partners? All right. Also, thanks to Jenny. Jenny, where are you for putting this together? There you are, Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. Allison in the back and Brittany for putting this together. And finally, yes, a round of applause. Allison, yes. All right. And I'm going to leave a couple of minutes at the tail end for Colleen. My final thanks is to St. Thomas for us reviving this partnership and making it all work. And I see Mike back there, our board members who are working with St. Thomas through us and making this partnership grow and grow. Like we said, the best partnership and the best turnout we've had, because this is stuff we can use. Finally, we have, just before Colleen comes on, our next, I don't know if you're going to mention this, our next, and we will adjourn at 9 o'clock. But we will be in the room, by the way, for another 30 minutes if you've made a love connection at your table or something and you want to. Okay. Now, our next, because this is also from bubbling up from the roundtable, is we have the next topic on December 4th. December 4th is on succession planning and leadership cultivation. So as you cultivate leadership within, through good culture, and as you cultivate good leadership in your organization. Hi, Amol. I didn't see you there. As you cultivate leadership for the cause of succession planning, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years out or more imminent, it's important to talk about that. So December 4th will be the next one. All right. Without further delay, Colleen, with Opus and St. Thomas.
Okay, I can can do this in ready, set, time. So first of all, as Michael mentioned, this really started out as an idea, a reconnection, if you will, and it's grown into a partnership, but truthfully, I feel like we're in a relationship now, and I'm really thrilled with that. The number of folks who are continually coming, the invitation for our alumni to be served in the room is really quite something. This is our 7th program, and I have some statistics to just share with you about what we've all accomplished here. As Michael mentioned, this is our largest registration to date. We were at 100, so we're really thrilled with that. Our first program was 59 people, so we're growing, and we're really happy with that. 130 organizations have been represented through the 7 times that we've hosted this event, and today we have 20 new organizations represented, so we're really, really thrilled with that. So let's just keep this going. I'd like to build on this program today and share with you in the upcoming events profile that was outside at the table. There's an event coming up with our other partner, Drive, part of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce, and we're going to be talking about meaningful work. And I think that really fits in nicely with this idea of culture. The goal is to take young leaders in your organization, give them the opportunity to lean into what is meaningful work for me. What is my responsibility to bring that to the people who I serve and I lead in the organization? So we really encourage you to invite folks to come to that. And then, because Bob's in the room, they have a big open house tomorrow. Yes. Yeah, Warner Stellian has a grand opening, and I just thought I'd share that because we saw it. 4:30, new showroom. Why not share, right? And then just want to thank our fabulous speakers today. And one thing that I'll offer, Kara, is it Kara? I have some resources that I can send through to Michael on blending that manufacturing culture with the rest of your organization, some ways to celebrate. So I'm happy to send that out just as a share. So I think that's all I've got. I'm under time. Thank you, everybody.